Television has seen its fair share of controversies, but nothing quite like this. Because what happened here wasn't just a mistake. The IT wasn't even just bad timing. It was a slow, deliberate unraveling of one of the most beloved shows in American history. A show that gave audiences comfort for over a decade, a show that ended with one of the most emotional goodbyes ever filmed, and then had that ending completely destroyed, overnight, by the very network that created it. So, what went wrong? How did a perfect farewell turn into one of television's most infamous disasters? And how did 5 forgotten episodes rise from the dead to undo everything? This is the story of how a classic was broken after it had already said goodbye. Long before the final disaster, the cracks had already begun to form. By the late 1970s, the show wasn't just successful, it was unstoppable. Families gathered around their televisions every week. Characters had become household names. The world it created felt real, familiar, almost like home. But behind the scenes, something was shifting. At the center of it all was a quiet tension, one that most viewers never saw, because while the show appeared to be built around one central character, another had quietly taken over. Arthur Fonzarelli, the leather jacket, the motorcycle, the confidence, the catchphrase everyone could imitate. He wasn't just popular, he was a phenomenon. Suddenly, audiences weren't just watching the show, they were watching him. And the network noticed. To them, the solution seemed obvious, almost too obvious. If one character was driving the ratings, why not make him the focus of everything? So they came up with an idea. A simple change, just 2 words. But those 2 words nearly changed television history forever. They wanted to rename the show. Not adjust it, not evolve it, rename it. And in doing so, rewrite everything it stood for. When the idea reached the cast, it didn't land the way executives expected, especially not with the man who had been there from the beginning. Ron Howard, at just 21 years old, he had already spent years shaping the heart of the show. His character wasn't just a lead, it was the emotional anchor. So when he heard the proposal, he didn't hesitate. There was no negotiation, no compromise, just a line drawn in the sand. If the name changed, he would walk away. Completely. It wasn't about EGO, IT wasn't even about screen time. It was about something deeper. Because he understood something the network didn't. This wasn't a one-man show. It worked because of balance, because of contrast, because every character had a role to play. Take one piece out, and the entire structure collapses. What shocked everyone wasn't just his stance, it was who stood beside him. Henry Winkler, the very person who stood to gain the most from the change, rejected it. He didn't see it as an opportunity. He saw it as a mistake. Because even he knew the truth. The magic didn't come from one character. It came from all of them, together. That moment of unity saved the show, at least for a while. But it also revealed something dangerous, a growing divide between creativity and corporate thinking. And that divide would come back later, with consequences no one could have predicted. While the show thrived on screen, off-screen, the reality was far more complicated. Because behind the confidence, behind the iconic image, was a man carrying something much heavier. Before fame, before recognition, Henry Winkler was struggling. Not metaphorically, literally. He arrived with almost nothing, uncertain, under pressure, just trying to survive. Landing the role changed everything. Almost instantly, he became one of the most recognizable faces in the country. But fame has a strange way of taking something, even as it gives you everything. Because over time, the line between the character and the person began to blur. The leather jacket wasn't just wardrobe anymore. The IT became identity. The confidence people saw on screen wasn't always there off screen. And when the show finally ended, that identity didn't just fade. It disappeared. Suddenly. And what replaced it was silence. No scripts, no audience, no character to step into. Just one difficult question. Who are you when the thing that defined you is gone? For years, that question lingered. Opportunities became limited. Roles became harder to find. The world didn't want to see something new. They wanted the same thing over and over again, and breaking free from that image proved far more difficult than anyone expected. But even as personal struggles unfolded, something much bigger was about to happen, something that would affect not just one person, but the entire legacy of the show itself. It started with what seemed like a simple scheduling decision. A global event that a major opportunity, the kind networks compete for, the Winter Olympics. To executives, it was a no-brainer. Clear the schedule, make space, maximize ratings. But in doing so, they made a decision that would quietly set everything in motion. Episodes were pushed, timelines were disrupted. The natural flow of story was broken. At the time, it didn't seem catastrophic, just a temporary shift. But what came next changed everything. When it was time for the final episode to air, the show did what it had always done best. It delivered emotion, closure, a sense of completion. Characters moved forward, stories reached their natural end. And for the first time in years, there was a feeling of goodbye. But one moment stood above all the rest, a moment that almost didn't happen, because it broke one of television's most sacred rules, the fourth wall. Executives were against it from the start. To them, it was dangerous, too unconventional, too risky. But the creator saw it differently. He understood something they didn't. After 11 years, the audience wasn't just watching, they were part of it. So, instead of pretending the cameras weren't there, he chose to acknowledge them directly. When the moment finally aired, something unexpected happened. It didn't feel strange. It didn't feel forced. It felt real. For a brief moment, the barrier between fiction and reality disappeared, and in its place was something honest, a farewell, not just from characters, but from people who had shared years together. Viewers didn't just watch it, they felt it, and for a while, it seemed like the perfect ending. But here's where everything falls apart. Because while audiences believed the story was over, the network knew something they didn't. There were still episodes left, unaired, unfinished in the timeline, left behind because of earlier scheduling changes. And instead of leaving them untouched, they made a decision that would break one of storytelling's most important rules. They brought the show back, after it had already ended. No build-up, that no explanation. Just more episodes. As if nothing had happened. As if the goodbye never existed. At first, viewers were confused. Then frustrated. Because emotionally they had already moved on. They had accepted the ending, processed it, felt it. And now, suddenly the story was continuing again. But not in a meaningful way. These weren't carefully crafted conclusions. They were leftovers. Disconnected. Out of place. And with each episode that aired, the damage grew worse. The final image people remembered began to shift from something emotional to something confusing, from something meaningful to something unfinished. And then came the final blow. The last episode to ever air. Not the real finale, but the one that ended up being remembered by many. Instead of dignity, it offered something else entirely. An ending that felt small, out of character, almost hollow. For a show that once defined an era, this was how it faded out. Not with impact, but with confusion. The aftermath was immediate. Critics questioned it. Fans struggled with it. And within the industry, people took notes. Because what happened here became more than just a mistake. It became a lesson, a warning. That storytelling isn't just about content. It's about timing, emotion, respect for the audience. Once a story ends, you don't reopen it. You don't undo the goodbye. That moment changed how television handled finales forever. Contracts evolved, rules were put in place, because no one wanted to repeat what happened here. For the cast, the ending carried a different kind of weight. Some moved forward quickly. Ron Howard stepped behind the camera and built a career that would redefine his legacy entirely. Others took longer. Henry Winkler had to rebuild from the ground up, finding new ways to prove himself beyond the role that made him famous. Some found steady success. Some faced challenges that never fully disappeared. But all of them carried the same strange reality. They had been part of something unforgettable with an ending that never quite felt complete. And yet, time has a way of rewriting stories. Years later, something unexpected happened. A reunion. Not forced, not scripted in the same way, but real. Two familiar faces point one familiar moment. A simple gesture that instantly brought everything back. For a brief second, it felt like nothing had changed, like the story had finally found the ending it deserved. Not on a scripted set, but in front of an audience that never really let go. And maybe that's the real ending. Not the one interrupted by scheduling mistakes. Not the one buried under leftover episodes. But the one people choose to remember. Because in the end, a story isn't defined by how it was handled behind the scenes. It's defined by how it made people feel. And that part was never lost. So, what started as one of television's most beloved journeys became one of its most important lessons. A reminder that even the biggest successes can be undone by the smallest decisions. And that sometimes the hardest part isn't creating something meaningful. It's knowing when to let it go. And maybe that raises one final question. If a story ends perfectly, but someone brings it back anyway, was it ever really over?